The bloodstain. The Phelps place was an old, abandoned property with a monstrous, decrepit Victorian house that was supposed to be haunted. It should have been a good resting place for the local deer hunters, but they would not go near it. A few that tried came away before midnight with tales of ghostly thumping noises, gasps, moans, and a terrible wet bloodstain that appeared on the floor of the front porch and could not be wiped away. Phelps was an Englishman who had purchased land some 20 miles off the Mendocino coast in the 1880s. He had built a huge, fancy Victorian house all covered with gingerbread trimmings and surrounded by lovely gardens. When everything was arranged to his liking, he sent out party invitations to everyone within messenger range. It was the biggest social event of the year, with music and dancing and huge amounts of food. Sawhorse tables were set up with refreshments, and drinks were set out on the front porch. People came from miles around. The only one missing was old man McIntyre's son-in-law. They had had a terrible fight that afternoon, and the boy had stalked off in a rage, threatening to get even with the old man. Around midnight, the musicians took a recess and old man McIntyre went out on the front porch with some friends. Suddenly there came the thunder of hooves rushing up the lane. A cloaked figure rode towards the lantern-lit porch. McIntyre put down his drink. "That will be my son-in-law," he told his friends as he went down the steps. The cloaked figure stopped his horse just outside the pool of lantern light. There was a sharp movement and 2 loud shots from a gun. Old man McIntyre staggered backwards, shot in the throat and the chest. The cloaked man wheeled his horse and fled down the lane as friends ran to the assistance of the old man. They laid McIntyre down on the porch. He was bleeding heavily and they were afraid to move him much. There was some talk of fetching the doctor, but everyone knew it was too late. So much blood was pouring from the old man's wounds that it formed a pool underneath his head. McIntyre coughed, once, twice, a hideous, gurgling, strangling sound that wrenched at the hearts of all who heard it. Then he died. McIntyre's body was laid out on the sofa, and the once merry guests left in stricken silence. The servants came and wiped the red-brown bloodstain off the floorboards. The next day, a wagon was brought to the front of the house and McIntyre's body was carried out onto the porch. As the men stepped across the place where McIntyre had died, blood began to pool around their boots, forming a wet stain in exactly the pattern that had been wiped up by the servants the night before. The men gasped in fear. One of them staggered and almost dropped the body. They hurriedly laid McIntyre in the back of the wagon, and a pale Phelps ordered the servants to clean up the fresh bloodstain. From that day forward, the Phelps could not keep that part of the porch clean. Every few weeks, the damp bloodstain would reappear. They tried repainting the porch a few times, but the bloodstain would always leak through. In the county jail, McIntyre's son-in-law died of a blood clot in the brain. A few months later, one of the Phelps servants went mad after seeing a terrible sight that made his head feel like it was going to explode. Folks started saying the house was being haunted by the ghost of McIntyre, seeking revenge. The property was resold several times, but each resident was driven out by the terrible, gasping ghost of McIntyre reliving his last moments and by the bloodstain that could not be removed from the porch. The house was eventually abandoned. The Bloody Mary ritual. We were having a sleepover at my house that Saturday night. Me and my 4 best friends, Alex, Bianca, Sabrina, and Lacey. We made cookies and watched movies and did our hair and makeup. By midnight, we'd run out of planned activities. It was time to improvise. "Let's try that Bloody Mary thing," Lacey suggested. Alex, who was sitting cross-legged on her sleeping bag, said, "What's the Bloody Mary thing?" Sabrina, who was lounging on top of her own sleeping bag on the far side of the room, said, "Come on, Alex. Everyone knows the Bloody Mary thing. You stand in front of the bathroom mirror with a lighted candle and say the witch's name 3 times. Then her ghost appears, looking just the way she did when she died, all horrible and bloody with scars all over her face. She sounds gorgeous. Just why, exactly, Do you think I would want to see the ghost of Bloody Mary? Alex asked skeptically. Why not? I said from my place on the pull-out couch in the living room. I've always wanted to see a ghost. It could be fun. Besides, I've heard she can tell your future if you summon her correctly. And if you don't summon her correctly, or if she's in a bad mood, the ghost of Bloody Mary will rip your eyes out and leave your face horribly scarred, Lacey said dramatically. Or you will be found dead with claw marks all over your face and body. Or you could be trapped in the mirror with Bloody Mary for eternity, Sabrina added. Oh, that sounds like fun. Disfigurement, death, or entrapment. What a fabulous way to spend eternity, Alex said sarcastically. Where do I sign up? It's a load of crap, Bianca said as she tried to balance on one foot on the arm of the pull-out couch. It's just a story told to scare little kids. Bloody Mary isn't real. I've heard it's real, I said. My friend Katie tried it once and saw the ghost in the mirror. Bloody Mary told Kate that when she grows up she is going to become a research doctor who cures cancer and saves lots of lives and wins a Nobel Prize. Hogwash, said Bianca dismissively. There's only one way to know for sure, said Sabrina. Come on. Let's try it. I ran to the supply closet to get a candle and matches, and all of us, even Alex and the disbelieving Bianca, crowded into our large downstairs bathroom. This is a bad idea, Alex said nervously as we lit the candle. It's not. It's the perfect thing to do at a sleepover, I said. Like telling ghost stories. Only this one might be true. Here, you hold the candle. I thrust the flickering candle into Alex's hand. Once the candle was lit, Bianca turned all the bathroom lights. As we stood before the bathroom mirror, I told everyone the story of Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary was the name of an evil witch that lived back in colonial times. The witch used her black arts to make her young again by killing a bunch of young girls in her village. When the villagers discovered Bloody Mary was behind the murders, they burned her at the stake. Bloody Mary used mirrors to help her locate and enchant her victims, and she cursed all mirrors when the villagers executed her, so that anyone chanting her name 3 times would be pulled into the mirror with her to spend eternity in the flames. By the time I finished the eerie tale, all my friends were looking a little nervous. But we were excited too. Maybe we'd see a real ghost. The candle in Alex's hand flickered a moment and then steadied as the 5 of us chanted Bloody Mary's name 3 times in front of the bathroom mirror. I held my breath, not knowing what to expect, and wondered what Bloody Mary might say about my future. Maybe I would marry Robbie when I graduated from college. Robbie was a cute boy that I liked in my science class. The 5 of us waited tensely as we gazed without blinking at our faces reflected in the glass. The only sound was the ticking of the little wind-up clock my mom kept in the bathroom. I strained my eyes, trying to see through the mirror into some nether realm that I both dreaded and hoped might be there. Finally, Bianca said, "Nothing's happening. Let's just get out of here." She reached for the doorknob and turned it. The door wouldn't open. The door wasn't locked when we started the ritual. I knew this for a fact because I checked the door in case we needed to make a quick getaway. After all, there was the possibility, however faint, that it might not be just a scary story told to frighten little kids. I rushed to the door, pushed Bianca aside, and unlocked it. But when I tried the knob, the door wouldn't open. Something, or did I mean someone, was holding it shut. Suddenly, Alex screamed and pointed at the mirror. I whirled away from the locked door and saw a glowing white figure staring at us from the mirror. Her face was twisted with malice and flames seemed to flicker around her. In one hand she held a bloody knife. It was Bloody Mary. We all screamed and my friends backed away from the mirror, all but Alex, who stood frozen by the bathroom sink with the candle still clutched in her shaking hand. All of a sudden, Bloody Mary lunged forward, her knife hand coming straight out of the mirror and striking Alex fiercely in the face. Long scratches appeared on Alex's cheeks and she staggered backward with a gasp of pain, hands coming up to protect her face. A wave of heat and anger poured out of the mirror in a blast that blew his head over heels. My forehead struck the wall and I fell senseless to the floor. I woke in darkness a few moments later and groped desperately for the light switch. When I turned it on, I found Lacey unconscious beside me and Alex blacked out beside the bathroom sink with deep scratches all over her arms and legs and face. Sabrina was huddled sobbing behind the toilet. I pulled her out and gasped when I saw she was also covered in scratches. She'd been standing too close to the mirror and the ghost had knifed her too. I shook Lacey and Alex awake and the four of us clung together weeping and shaking with fear. "I told you this was a bad idea," Alex gasped. My eyes widened suddenly when I realized there were only four of us crouching on the bathroom floor. "Where's Bianca?" I cried in alarm. I leapt to my feet and stared at the bathroom mirror, but it only reflected the wall and my frightened face. Oh dear Lord, what if Bianca was pulled into the mirror with Bloody Mary? Would we ever see her again? What would I tell her parents? "Try the door again," Alex gasped, lunging forward to grab the knob. It opened immediately. Apparently, the door was released from the lock spell as soon as Bloody Mary disappeared. We ran to the living room, hoping to find Bianca huddled in her sleeping bag. She wasn't there. We searched all over the downstairs for her. I was about ready to wake my parents and confess the whole stupid mess to them when Lacey gave a yell from the laundry room. Bianca was lying unconscious beside the washing machine with blood and scratches all over her face. The ghost had scratched a message deep into the flesh of her right forearm. It said, "I am real." My stomach lurched and I wanted to throw up when I saw Bloody Mary's message. Instead, I knelt down and shook my friend's shoulder, trying to wake her up. After nearly a minute of calling her name, Bianca finally opened her eyes. She groaned and rolled to a sitting position. "What happened to you?" I asked, dabbing at her cuts with a hand towel from the bathroom. "After that horrible ghost knocked the four of you down, it grabbed me by the hair and pulled me through the mirror," Bianca said with a shudder. I felt something scratching my face and hands, and I tried to fight back, but I was knocked to the ground and dragged along the cold floor by my hair. The ghost tossed me into a dark room. I couldn't see anything, but I felt the ghost clutch my arm and there was this terrible pain. That's all I remember until I heard your voices and the light came on. She saw the look on our faces and glanced down at her sore arm. She went so white I thought she would faint again, so I pushed her head between her knees until the dizziness passed. We cleaned up the blood on Sabrina and Alex and Bianca, and then the five of us huddled in the living room for the rest of the night, too scared to sleep. We made up some story in the morning for my parents about bumping into the furniture while playing a game to explain the scratches on my three friends. No one showed them the message on Bianca's arms. We've had other sleepovers since that night, but my friends and I never tried the Bloody Mary ritual again. The Blue Rocks. The story was told furtively, in lowered voices. Buried treasure. Near the Blue Rock. A long time ago, an unknown ship dropped anchor in the surf near Wasp Bluff. A small boat carrying a mysterious figure, 6 sailors, and a large box landed on the beach. The sailors dug a deep hole inland near the Blue Rock, and the box was lowered into it. As the sailors stepped back, their leader threw a small green package onto the box. With a huge crash and a flash of blinding green light, the hole disappeared. The silent group walked back to the boat, leaving behind scorched, blackened earth. After hearing several whispered versions of the story, 2 adventurers decided to have a go at the treasure. They would meet at the rock at midnight. The first chap arrived early. Tired out from his long walk, he leaned against the large stone and closed his eyes. A sound from the waters jerked him awake. Turning around, the treasure hunter could just make out the lines of a very large ship, sails set, coming in fast toward shore. There was no one moving on deck, and no one stood at the wheel. Yet the ship dodged the shoals and shallows as expertly as any fisherman on the island. Just when it seemed she would run aground, every sail dropped instantly and the ship drifted gently forward until her keel lightly touched the sandy shore. And then, with a horrible shout, the hatch crashed open and a group of glowing skeletons came swarming out onto the deck. They were a merry crew, joking and laughing as they handed around spades and shovels. Then they came filing down the plank, carrying a dead body. The skeletons came right toward the rock. They stopped a few yards from the treasure hunter and started to dig. Almost instantly there was a deep hole, and the spades rang as they hit metal. The treasure hunter caught a glimpse of a large box filled with gold and silver, onto which the corpse was tumbled. As the hole was refilled, one of the skeletons looked toward the blue rock. It spotted the intruder and came for him, followed by its ghastly crewmates. The treasure hunter was so stiff with fear that he couldn't run. The skeletons swarmed around him like bees and lifted him up, bearing him back toward the hole. Realizing that they intended to bury him alive with the corpse, the treasure hunter gave an almighty screech that frightened even these terrible ghosts. They dropped him, and his head fell with a bang against a rock. For a moment he saw stars. But fear overcame dizziness, and he pushed himself up and turned to find that the phantoms were gone. No skeletons, no ship, no corpse, not even any treasure could be seen in the dim light of the moon. This scared the treasure hunter even worse than the phantoms, and he hightailed it for home. When his friend arrived at the Blue Rock a little after midnight, all was dark and lonely. Quizzed the next day about his defection, the treasure hunter reluctantly told his friend the story. His unfeeling friend clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Better you than me." But somehow, neither of them ever went back to look for the treasure. The cursing of Colonel Buck. Now Colonel Buck was not what you call the most virtuous man in town. No, sir. He had an eye for the ladies, did Colonel Buck, and he would chase them till he got what he wanted. Then he would drop them like a hot brick. Well, Colonel Buck has a pretty maid working for him. It weren't long before he started noticing her, and she, poor lass, started looking back. One thing led to another, don't you know, and one day Colonel Buck turned out his pretty maid, seeing as she was unmarried and in the family way. Well now, that pretty lass had a deformed baby boy, and she had a hard time making ends meet with a growing son. She began putting pressure on old Colonel Buck to take responsibility for the boy. Well, Colonel Buck weren't having none of that. He began putting it about town that this lassie was really a witch. The rumor spread and spread. The townsfolk became afeard of the lass, and one day they grabbed the woman and brought her before Colonel Buck. He condemned her to death for sorcery and had her burned at the stake. The woman shouted a curse at the colonel as she burned, swearing that he would always bear the mark of this injustice. Her poor young son was forced to watch his mother being burned as a witch. When one of his mother's legs fell from her burning body, he broke away from the crowd, ran forward to pick up the leg and fled. It was the only piece of his mother he had left to bury. After Colonel Buck's death, a grand tombstone was erected in his honor. A few weeks later, a strange discoloration began to form on the stone. It was the picture of a woman's leg. The reminder of the woman and her curse embarrassed the people of Bucksport. They had the stone thrown out to sea. But the stone was washed ashore, the image of the leg still branded upon it. The town leaders had the stone smashed to bits, and they put a new tombstone on Colonel Buck's grave. But the image of the leg reappeared on the new stone and could not be removed. It remains there to this day, a reminder of a poor girl who was robbed of her innocence and later her life by Colonel Buck.